Gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of In Defense Of, where I, your host, Ryan the Indie Nerd, former Deep Six wrestling champion, go and defend some sort of action, match, or wrestler, or something in the wrestling world that is either hated, controversial, or just not liked by a majority of wrestling fans. Today's episode, we're going to look at something that in today's age might be considered a hot take or a controversial take, and that is in defense of intergender wrestling. Now, intergender wrestling has happened before, especially in the WWE, but you're seeing a big comeback in a lot of indie promotions doing shows with intergender wrestling being allowed to happen. You're seeing matches such as in Impact. You just had their main event of their last pay-per-view where it was Tessa Blanchard versus Sami, Callihan in what was considered by a few people to be one of the best matches of that entire show. Many people who do not like this, who do not view intergender wrestling as a positive or something that should be highlighted in wrestling, point to domestic violence, point to assault, point to how men are supposed to be stronger than women, or men are always going to be stronger than women. And this is where that controversial part comes into. A lot of people still hold some sort of sexist or misogynistic views where men always are going to be better than women at everything, anything physical. And that's where I believe in wrestling, intergender wrestling actually has its biggest detractor. Now, wrestling, pro wrestling in general, normally you have to watch it with some ideas that just can't be held in the realm of reality. You're not going to normally have, if you're supposed to be fighting somebody who is out of shape, who is slower than most other people, who's older than other people, who's badly injured, they're not going to be able to withstand the onslaught of a 10-15 minute match with somebody who's fresher, who's more in shape, who is younger maybe, who isn't injured. But in wrestling, anything can happen. They make sure to say that a lot of times during shows, that in the world of wrestling, anything can happen. That's why people like Rey Mysterio, who's one of the shorter wrestlers in the world, or at least in major players of wrestling, he's one of the shorter guys, can compete and beat people like the Great Khali, who's one of the larger people, Big Show, another larger fellow. It's where people such as Kurt Angle could still try to go with some of the younger crowd of wrestlers. It's how John Cena has been able to wrestle pretty much almost nearing 20 years now with some of the best of the older generation of wrestling, the early 2000s to even today, whenever he does come back. Same thing with Randy Orton. He's been going at it for almost 20 years as well. Normally you wouldn't have that anywhere else. And that's where you have to think, well, if we take that piece of wrestling, that anybody can win on any given match at any given time by any given move, why can't certain people get rid of that idea that they think that men are greater than women, they're stronger than women, they're better wrestlers than women? So with that being said, I think that's where people need to kind of get rid of those ideas of, well, a man can't lose to a woman, they're not strong enough, they're not as fast, they're not as good of wrestlers. And I think we're starting to see that come into play in a lot of places where a lot of wrestling, like Impact, starting to see it in Ring of Honor a little bit, where the women are taking moves from men. Even the last pay-per-view in WWE, you had Becky Lynch eat a End of Days, but with that little piece of it, it was just made to make the man look like he was attacking somebody who was defenseless, even though it was a wrestler. They made it seem as though it was an assault on somebody's loved one, instead of making it that there are 4 competitors in the ring. They all could win the match for their team. They can all hit moves very well. They can all attack each other. They're all healthy. They're all strong individuals. But they made it so that that one move was looked at as an attack on someone who was weak. They made it seem as though this person in this case Baron Corbin, shouldn't have been able to hit that move on Becky Lynch, and that's what caused the little snap in Seth Rollins, that he didn't view Becky as another competitor. He viewed her as, this is my girlfriend, this is who I am in love with, and you're attacking that person instead of just another wrestler. So I think in WWE they still need to kind of shift that, and I think a lot of people who are in this whole belief that WWE needs to go less PG, go back to the TV 14 ratings that the Attitude Era was, a lot of those same people who think that they need to do that are also the same people who are saying, well, we can't have those intergender wrestling, you can't have the men and the women wrestling each other. Even though in the Attitude Era, and even the early parts of the Ruthless Aggression Era, you had women fighting the men. Lita would take moves from the men all the time. Trish Stratus took some. Chyna took beatings, but was always made to look stronger. So you can't have this whole idea, well, we want to go back to the Attitude Era, but we can't use that part of the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era is not what we're defending today. What we are trying to defend is intergender wrestling, and not just a move or two on a woman. We're talking about matches where men and women compete against each other. There are a few wrestlers that are women who are considered some of the best wrestlers in the world. Not the best women's wrestlers, the best wrestlers in the world. Io Shirai, Kairi Sane, Asuka are some in WWE. You could even make the argument of Charlotte and Bayley, Sasha when she was healthy and not trying to kill herself during matches, and Becky, of course, are some of the better wrestlers in the world that just happen to be women. And Ronda Rousey as well, who in her first match in the WWE, let it be remembered, had that Mania match where she actually did attack Triple H and did hit moves against Triple H, and that was showing that she can hang with the boys. She can hang with anybody, and she proved that during her run with WWE. In the world of indie wrestling, you have the likes of Tessa Blanchard, who is arguably one of the best complete wrestlers in the world today. You have a lot of the women in Stardom who probably could hang with some of the guys. I'm not too familiar with their style or every single wrestler over there, but you do see occasionally some of them when they're in other promotions actually fighting against some of the males. In AEW, again, you got now B. Priestley, you have Britt Baker, you have Awesome Kong, you have Aja Kong. These are all people that you could arguably have a match between a man and a woman if they want to, and arguably have a very compelling storyline match or a technical match as well. They are very good wrestlers. Now, to have this idea that the men and the women can compete against each other without it being seen as domestic violence. You have to look at it as these are people who are athletes, or actors in this case, who are trying to showcase their abilities, their wrestling abilities, and they want to go against the best in the world. And maybe a man's the best in the world. A woman might want to try to compete against that man to show that she is as good, or if not better. Same thing with the men. There's an argument that you could say that some of the men are not as good as the women, but they want to show that they can be. And that's where you can have these wrestling matches. You do not have to make it a gimmick match. You do not have to make it where the women always have to come out on top. You can just show that these are two wrestlers, or 3 or 4, however many you want to have in the match. These are wrestlers who want to compete at the highest level against each other and showcase their abilities. You do not have to make it about gender. You do not have to make it about anything other than it's just two competitors who want to have the best possible match, the best possible outcome to help further their careers. In AEW, I think this is going to be very interesting to see if they will actually do that. You do have some people in there who have had intergender matches, Penelope Ford. You have others who might want to go and try it if they haven't done it before. But you can arguably say with this whole idea that it's going to have some more basis in the world of sports, that maybe they will go a route and try to show that the men and the women can compete against each other. It'll be interesting how they can do that, with a lot of people saying that the reason WWE doesn't do it is because of advertisers. Now that AEW has a massive TV deal, it'll be interesting to see if they are able to do it, or if they back away from those types of moments because of advertisers. Another person that springs to mind in AEW when it comes to intergender spots, or Joey Janela has done some. Brandy and Cody, while it's not actually sanctioned matches that I know of where they are wrestling together against another couple, and actually hitting moves on the other couples, Brandy against the male versus Brandy, so on and so forth. Brandy has made it known previously in her and Cody's lines of work throughout New Japan, throughout Ring of Honor, even in AEW so far, that she will go after the men. And normally it's in more of a valet role or a manager role, but she makes sure that most of those times she is in wrestling gear, and she is known as a wrestler in AEW now. So you can see that getting intertwined in some of the stories, and it would be interesting to see how they actually do it. So this idea that intergender wrestling should be frowned upon, most people who participate in it do not see it as that. They see it as, this is how we want to express ourselves, this is how we want to showcase our skills. And I do think that in the future you will get to see some of those actions actually come out. You might actually get to see some more intergender wrestling on bigger platforms like the WWE, maybe even AEW, now that it is passing slowly Impact and Ring of Honor. And it'll be interesting to see if it can be considered, and AEW can be a viable platform for it to showcase the skills of both women and male wrestlers against each other. We are in an age now that it's considered the women's revolution in professional wrestling. It was just a few years ago that we had the women's revolution start in WWE, where the women were given more time to showcase their skills. They were starting to do some of the same match types as men. They even got to main event WrestleMania just this year for the first time. And you're seeing that also in other promotions as well. Like I said, Impact just had their main event where it was Tessa versus Sami. Callihan, so you do have that intergender spots making waves there. So it'll be interesting to see just how far other big promotions are willing to go with intergender wrestling. So with that being said, this concludes another episode of In Defense Of. I've been Ryan the Indie Nerd. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube here at Deep Six Wrestling. Make sure that you also follow us on social media, on Facebook at Deep Six Wrestling, and on Twitter at Deep Six Wrestling. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have any future ideas for In Defense Of episodes, comment below the video, comment on our Facebook and our Twitter page, DM us, whatever you want, and we will try to set that up. Thank you guys, and I will see you next time.